So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Race Talk with Lane and Eugene. I am Reverend Lane Cobb, and I'm here with my co-host, Reverend Eugene Holden. And we are happy today to be welcoming to speak with us today, Mr. Damon Yizar. And he has a rather extensive resume, and I'd like to just go ahead and read it. And then I'm going to turn the floor over to him. And he's going to speak for 20 minutes or so, and then we're going to open it up for questions. All right, so here we go. So in June 2016, Damon Yizar retired as Dean of Students at Woodlands Middle High School in Hartsdale, New York. Damon worked in the school district for 10 years, and before that, he worked as a high school administrator at Bellport High School in Long Island. He has extensive experience in the field of education and law enforcement. He is a retired police detective with the town of Greenburgh in White Plains, New York. During his tenure with Greenburgh PD, he was a certified EMT and DARE officer, School Resource Office, youth officer, and PBA board member. So that's the Police Benevolent Association, right?
Yes.
All righty, thank you. He has attained the rank of detective in the department's juvenile aid unit before his retirement. His education background has consisted of employment with Greenburgh CSD, New York City Board of Education, Monroe Woodbury CSD in Orange County, and South Country CSD in Long Island. He received his Bachelor of Science in Education from Wagner College and a Master of Science in Education, specializing in administration and supervision from the College of New Rochelle. So you are definitely a New York boy. Damon currently serves as Fire Commissioner of the Fairview Fire District in the Township of Greenburgh and Membership Chairperson for the African American Men of Westchester, Incorporated. He is also a member of the following organizations. Oh my goodness, I'm going to read all of these. Wow. Westchester Rockland Guardian Association, IAABO Board number 52. That has to do with being a basketball official. I love it. FACT, Father and Children Together, Union Baptist Church Food Ministry, Rye Neck High School and Wagner College Athletic Hall of Fame, and Sigma Phi Rho Fraternity. He has received numerous awards and citations, but his prized possession is the Paul Harris Fellow Award from Rotary International. He was born and raised in Mamaroneck, New York, and is a graduate of Rye Neck High School. He resides in White Plains, New York, with his wife, Anolder, and two children, Woodlands High School graduates, Jada and Joshua. And so with that, sir, I'm going to welcome Mr. Damon Yizar.
Hello there, people. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today.
And you know, of course, let me tell you, I didn't even tell the people what you're going to talk about. I'm sorry.
No problem.
We're going to hear from you. I'm excited about this, about the school to prison pipeline and some of the things that actually can be done to ameliorate that practice. And I can't wait for that. So, all right, with that, I'll shut up.
Yes. Okay. Well, as I was saying before, it's an honor and a privilege to be on the program. I learned through the program from my buddy Joseph Masak, who's there. How you doing there, Joe? Okay. And I know, well, don't know. I just know of Lane from her mother and father, because I also am a member of the NAACP, AXO. And their parents are very heavily involved with that, along with some other people that I know. And, you know, Eugene and the rest. So I've been viewing the program for the last couple of weeks. Lane asked me to talk about this subject, which is I'm very passionate about, because the fact that working in the schools and being a law enforcement officer, it gave me a great perspective of how this school to prison pipeline really works and how it can be kind of changed, and some of the remedies that are out there that now are being a little more considerate when it comes to our children. I'm going to go over some points, and with it, one of the first points I'm going to go over is the critical look at existing schools disciplinary discipline policies. Now, we talk about the pipeline from school to prison. A lot of it deals with discipline. how children are disciplined in the schools. And today I'm just really going to deal with New York State, because around this country, all states have different policies and rules when it comes to youth in school. So I'm going to stick strictly, with New York and how the New York system works. As you know, with most schools, when it comes to discipline, children are disciplined based on their behavior in school. Um, I've been, even though with the law enforcement as a detective, but I also worked with the schools. When I was a police officer with the town of Greenburgh, part of my duties was to be the school education liaison, since I had a background in education. And I dealt with a lot of school districts. And a lot of the times we went over their policy when it came to disciplining children. And as you know, back in the probably, I would say early 2000s, a policy of zero tolerance came along when it came to school discipline. And what that did was kind of made it one way, strict and narrow. And as dealing with this, a lot of these disciplinary policies really affected children who lived in the urban school districts. With New York State, we have the Big Five: New York City, Rochester, Syracuse, Buffalo, and Yonkers. Now, someone from Westchester County, Yonkers at one time had a very high rate of, as you say, school disciplines, where kids were getting suspended from school and actually leaving school because of the policies that were there. And as we talk about that, time has changed, because the zero policy discipline that was going in was kind of taken out because it was too strict. And also, too, it really dampened the as you call, the education gap when it came to children of color and even children who will live in poverty areas. It wasn't fair, because number one, they didn't have the, as you say, the resources or the background to deal with a lot of the things that go on. Now, not to discriminate, but if you live in an area like a Scarsdale or a Chappaqua or even a Blindbrook school district, because their parents have a lot of power and can afford good attorneys with things, when kids are disciplined, a lot of their disciplinary problems are kind of sometimes, as we call, expunged. Because with these policies that they have, it sticks with the child. And if law enforcement is involved, it becomes even more complicated. And that leads on to the next issue I'm going to talk about: the actual practice of school in law enforcement. Now, part of my resume.
Damon, before you get to that, can I just say, because some of our viewers may not be really familiar with the school to prison pipeline issue, and I think that it wasn't really well known until Eric Holder, right? Attorney General, kind of started doing these studies and called it the school to prison pipeline. I did send some resources. So, and you're doing a great job talking about it. Do you believe that there is such a thing as a school to prison pipeline?
Oh, yes. I mean, as you know, when it comes to children, the most important thing I knew was education, especially if you live in the urban area or you live in the poor area. I think sit back and say education will set you free. And if children are not educated, or children not allowed to enjoy a good education because of what you might call of social issues, which do become, as you say, disciplinary issues, it affects them very much. Now, in the school systems, for example, in the old days, children who were very hard to deal with, a lot of them were put into special education. And it wasn't because of their academics or how smart they were, it was because there were disciplinary problems. And special ed was one way of sitting back doing. Just a little back history: New York school system, back in the 60s, 70s, had what they call the 600 schools. Those were the schools where children who could not function properly in the regular school system, regular school, will be put in these special schools. And due to the dropout rate of these kids going to this school, the next step, as you sit back, would be, as you say, either life of crime or even prison. And that's where that whole theory came from. And a lot of it's with the urban areas. I hate to say it, you know, children of color, you know, and also to poor people. You know, there are some poor whites in areas around this country where that this affects them very much. So when you sit back and you say the school to pipeline um, issue, that's what it means by that, because they're not in school, they're not getting educated. The only step left out there for some of these students is a life of crime or other ways, which will actually lead to prison. Okay, so when I was talking about the next step with the actual practice of school and law enforcement, there was a big push, you know, with back in the 90s with a program called DARE, drug abuse resistance education, which started out in California, where that it started to bring police officers, trained police officers into the schools to teach children about different topics in different areas. It wasn't just strictly all about drugs. You know, you talked about peer pressure, you talked about positive reinforcements, and a lot of issues that children go to, but it was being taught by police officers. Now, when it first started out, it was taken to be very, as you say, positive. But in certain areas, it became more of a, I hate to use the word Gestapo, because in certain schools, when it came to the DARE officer, they were also used as information to deal with certain students. Now, I know in New York, with my job, it was more being a proactive person of having community relations with the children as a police officer instead of more as a law enforcement officer who works in the school. So after their program was around for a while, they started working what they call SROs, which are school resource officers, which are right now are in some of your school districts. Now, there's a big issue with that now because the whole thing of police reform. Are police officers needed in the schools? Should they be in the school? To me, it was a positive experience for me because I, you know, with an education and background, and I also worked where I lived, so it made a very positive impact on the children because not only they see me as a police officer, they also saw me as a citizen or a resident of the community. And if you get the right person to work in the schools, it works out very well. You know, some schools, you ask some kids, SRO is almost like their second parent because it's a person who's really, if you're trained the right way, someone you can talk to, someone you can tell your problems. And with me, a lot of the stuff was really about disclosure. You know, a lot of things I knew about the children that the parents didn't know, or even the school knew, but my objective was more to help the students be proactive than to use that against them. But you have messages too, because one of my main messages when I worked in the schools, I told children two things I will not tolerate as a student in the education system is drugs and weapons. Okay, those are zero tolerance for me. Anything else, social issues, peer pressure, problems, it makes life a little simple because now the child can trust you. It gives them another outlet. And to me, it was very positive for me. And I did it for about 8 years before I retired and then got into the real field of education where I became a dean of students, where it was almost like the same type of a job, but it was more in the educational sense than the law enforcement sense. And another benefit I had too was that I worked in my hometown. So there we go again. You know, when we talk about this, you know, the whole police reform, it's very important that you try to get people who are part, you know, of your community to be in these positions because the children will see me outside of, I say outside of school. You know, I go to church with a lot of them. I shop in the local areas. I'm very involved in the community. So they see me more just being that one person of that as just as also as another person. And plus my children also went to the school. So that gave even more because I had a chance to know more students on a personal basis through my children.
Brother Damon.
Yes, sir.
I have a question because you were speaking about being visible in the, where you live, where you work. How much contact do the schools have in terms of the home? Because I know that, some of the disciplinary problems that may show up at the school stem from the home. Was there any connection, or was there any resources that the home had?
Like I said before, since I had a very great passion, it's a lot of work. As
Right.
I say, you have to get the right person to do it, because my area expertise expanded outside. I work with the school social worker. I've worked with, you know, outside resources that the kids dealt with. Me as a person, I also got involved in their personal activities. I would just show up at an event. Most time you have your mandated event you have to go to, but if I know, a young man or a young girl who doesn't have a father or doesn't have parent participation, I would show up to one of their events, whether it's a sport event, whether it's a musical event, just to sit there and see that, what, someone cares for you. And that's a very positive impact for young children at an age who are lacking, especially in an area where that a lot of them don't have fathers. I have my favorite shirt on. It says "Daddy, the man, the myth, the legend." Is because I was a father actually to a lot more kids than my own. My house was almost like a playground when it came to to the children. And when you have that feeling and you put an effort into it, it has a lot of positive results. Now, I only can speak for myself, but
Right.
there are a lot of police officers who fit that role, who do these things, that are community minded. And some of them not even from the community, but they do spend enough time in there, to give. And it does take away from, as you say, your family if you don't live in the community. That's why it was very positive for me living in the community, because I didn't have to go but so far. So we talked about, the critical look at existing school discipline problems, the actual practice of school and law enforcement, all right, the impact of policies and practice. Another area we can talk about, which is very important, is child poverty in Westchester. Now, we live in Westchester, and we think that because we're in Westchester, which is a great suburban area, which is probably one of the top 5 or 10 richest, counties in the country. But there are areas where you have this issue. And most of it is, as you say, in the big cities, Yonkers, New Rochelle, White Plains. And what happens is that children in those school districts where they had issues and problems, okay, are the ones that you hear about in the newspaper. I know a couple of years ago, there was a murder in New Rochelle High School regarding a young lady, because of some things went bad, ended up being killed by a fellow student because of whatever it was. But you go into the background and the history, you can see that the child that actually was the perpetrator had a lot of issues. And that's where it comes from, as we sit back and say, from the pipeline, from school. Now that young lady's in prison because of those issues of with that being there. And when you have that poverty situation in Westchester, it does affect. A lot of us, we're immune to it. I know I was very fortunate. I went to Rhinebeck High School, which is in the village of Mamaroneck, where this isn't really a big issue. We don't have children, who go from, as you say, the school to prison. Most of our kids go from school to college to being productive citizens, in the country. So it's not a big issue. But with me working in the city, working in urban areas, you see it a lot. And a lot of times, my position that I held, I was able to make decisions that altered a lot of the children's lives. Now, I know right now we're talking about, the children, but one of the big pluses that have come along the last couple of years is a group called Student Advocacy. They have taken a big role, done a lot of studies, and have gotten into the schools to where a lot of the policies have been changed, where that they came in and sat back and said, like with schools, where suspension, okay, doesn't have to happen. All right, there's certain other ways of discipline that you can do with a child, because if you suspend a child from school who doesn't
Right.
have the resources outside of school, all you're doing is making it worse. So what they're telling the schools is that let's check into the children's background. Let's see what the real issue is. And if we can help them, let's do that first before we throw down the before you just throw them down and just kick them out or have them disillusioned.
That's I want to stop you right there because that's a great segue into a question that Joe Maystack has. Instead of me reading your question, Joe, why don't you unmute yourself and ask, please?
Thank you, Eugene. Hey, Damon.
Hey, Joe.
I have a question. Something that I learned that I was not aware of, Damon, was that an SRO officer, in their role, if there is an actual criminal act, an assault or something happens, in some school districts, the SRO their role is not to respond, and that if there's actual criminal activity, the school actually calls, or the SRO calls in the precinct or calls in the police department, and in that way they have a sort of like they're insulated, so they're really, the SRO has more of a role as an ally and not as an adversary, because they have to break up the fight, they have to do there's a drug situation or someone's caught, there's some bad activity going on. Can you talk about different models for how an SRO works, and what you think is the best way to push the notion that you're an ally and not to have a role as an adversary or avoid confusion?
Yeah, that's a good question. Even though I was trained to be an SRO, I never had a chance because I left the police department before, but I was trained and I've worked with SROs in the school districts that I work with. And getting back to your point, yes, they're not the ones, they just are more like the mediators. If there's a crime committed in the school, they do a lot of the initial background, information they check, but they will call in outside resources. Like they will call somebody from the police precinct or police headquarters to actually make the arrest.
Right.
Now, unless the SRO was a witness to the arrest or to the crime,
Right.
okay, they will get involved. But even still, then they always will call in, the department for someone to come in and to do, the work that needs to be done. The best method is always say communication. Because like right now, you have a lot of groups with children who are now have the opportunity to really talk to police officers in a manner way where it's not threatening and there'll be no repercussions with that. And that's what a good SRO is. He's there more for information to help. It's not just about being in the school, like I said before. It's also about helping at home if there's a problem at home. Younger siblings, parents, whatever. They can reach out to other areas, to other resources. Like for example, they can be in contact with a social worker. Because you'd be surprised, the information I received from the students because of the trust factor made my job easy. Because I always had a theory of, okay, I'm not going to tell. Just give me the information and I'll work out a way where if people ask me how I got the information, I will tell them different means and ways. I didn't want to expose the children because once they give you information that might be detrimental and you expose them, it's like being a snitch. You know how that goes. Once you start telling stuff, nobody wants to tell you anything. So, it's more like no questions asked. Let me know. I'll work it out. I'll let the right people know and they will do with that. So
can I
hopefully I
ask,
can answer your question.
because I don't know that that's not the standard model. Is that the standard model for
No.
SRO? Because that's why
No, well,
SROs are being removed from schools, right?
No, SRO model is more of being into school to kind of keep the peace. For some schools, like in the Yonkers school system, they're there for a reason. A lot of things go on in the school where safety is an issue. But I'm just saying, as you say, a prime example of to me, of a good SRO that has positive reenaction, because that's why I said New York State. You go to other states, you know, they're there like the police. You read these stories about, you know, kids being handcuffed, kids being roughed up by the police in the schools, the guys at SRO. Our model here, you know, that I know of, and the way I was taught, even in Westchester, okay, is more to be proactive than be reactive.
Well,
If you
Betsy,
have to react, you have to react. I mean, you're not going to sit there and watch a crime go down, or I'm not going to get involved.
so what's your opinion then, as far as whether SROs need to return into the school system or whether there just needs to be reform and SROs needs to stay in?
It's a positive. I mean, if you actually talk to a lot of the schools that have them, okay, they use them in the right way. I mean, you don't hear many incidents in Westchester where SRO officers are, you know, being used extreme force. Because I think the model is here is that because of how reform has happened, okay, your job's a little more flexible. It's no longer, as I say, zero tolerance. You know, you walk in the bathroom, kids are in there smoking or doing something. You know, before you take the kid, bring them to the principal's office, you get suspended, blah, blah, blah. Now you have options where you can talk to the student, kind of help them, like, you know, there are issues. Why are you smoking in school? Or why are you drinking in school? Or why are you selling drugs in school? You know, that's the factor, because there'll always be somebody else to come along and to do, okay, something that the child before has done. Carol, I see you had your hand raised up. Carol Johnson.
Thank you. Yes, I agree that the zero tolerance policy, suspend kids right away is, my son, who is Latino, we're from the Rochester, and we're right over the line into the next suburb. And he's 37 now. When he was in 10th grade, a family moved on the street. The mom was selling drugs. My son became friends with the kid. They tried marijuana. And my son got picked up with less than an ounce of marijuana in the school. I understand it's illegal. I get that. It's not something I would encourage. But they, vice principal roughed him up, took him to court. The judge said, I hate this zero tolerance crap, because they suspended him from December through the end of the school year. My husband had just passed away. I had to work, so he was loose. So he ended up getting in more trouble. He ran away from home, started selling drugs, in and out of jail. In-school suspension is much more painful for a child than stay home and play your game system or something. A lot better ways to handle that, I think.
Well, to answer your question, because of all the studies that have been going on, as I said before, I deal more with Westchester. Like I said, you start dealing with Rochester, Buffalo, New York City, even Yonkers. It's a whole different ball game because they have so many students. And the part is they're trying to use it as a deterrent, you know, with it. But now, because it has become a big issue, especially with females, you know, we're talking about this with males. Females now become the number one, problem in these schools. Because how do you deal with a female? Most of your resource officers are males, and the problem that you have is the last thing you want to be accused of. I know that was very, touchy, is dealing with females. What you say, how you do, especially, if you have to kind of, administer some type of physical force, everything is out of control. And each area is different. I mean, I can't really speak, for that. If you live out of state, for example, I hate to say it, in the state of New Orleans, you can still flog a student. The principal can bring them in and paddle them if they want to. In certain areas of New Orleans. And you know where those areas are. I can just tell you automatically. Okay? But who are the students, the ones who receiving this punishment? Who are the ones who get arrested? sent into school. One of my issues was that I used to go to court. I went to court for a lot of my students. And the judge would look at me like, what are you here for? You're the one who suspended them. I said, well, I did that because that's school law. But now we're dealing with, the criminal justice system. School has a certain law that you have to do. But the criminal justice system is the final say. This is a nice kid, good kid. He has problems in his family. And, sometimes you have to sit back and be the judge of the jury and also to the advocate, because they don't have advocacy. That's why I say the group student advocacy, if you're familiar with them, they have been a very positive force in changing a lot of the rules when it comes to the pipeline, the prison situation. And it gets there. And there are some people, I can't change their mind. Some parents hate SROs. I had parents who hated me because of the fact I was just a police officer. Why are you in the schools? Why are you doing A, B, and C? We had a discrepancy when I was in Greenberg. We have two school districts. We have Edgemont and we have Woodlands High School. Edgemont, no way. We do not want an SRO in our building, period. Even though I taught the DARE program there, that was good enough. But when it came to SROs, they did not want it. Where Woodlands was more, hey, you know what? We can use the extra eyes, the extra help. Not because of the kids, but because of the fact that it is a positive force. And I think a lot of the schools now, when they realize if it's done the right way, you get the right person. That's what I'm saying. It has to be done the right way. You need the right person. Because, we had little groups, SRO groups, even though I wasn't one of them, but since working in the schools, I would talk to the guys and kind of give them the meaning and the way of how to deal with the population here, because populations are different in different schools. So you can't come with a one approach. If you just look at the guideline book of SRO and you follow that, that's just like zero tolerance.
Right.
And that's when you run into issues and problems. So,
hey, Damon.
Yes, sir.
I have a question for you. Speaking about the females, do you have a theory as to about why girls are the growing discipline issue? Do you have a theory as to why?
I would tell you right now, social media.
Whew.
Speak more to that, please. My biggest issue when I was the dean of students in the school and I dealt with the female population was social media. Because social media could be mean-spirited, and with girls, they take it further than guys. Guys will sit there, look at it, have their little issues and move on. With females, it's a continuous. You think the problem's over and done with, before you know it, it's just starting. And it's little tidbit things, that lead up. Then finally, if you don't intervene or step in, it explodes. And right now, like I say, if you ask anybody who works in the schools, who will tell you the female problem is social media, because there's so much out there. You can say a lot of things, not to generalize, but as they say, females are a little more sensitive than guys. And you can say a little thing to them and it just blows up. And
so are you saying that they're fighting each other because of the social media influence? Is that what you're saying? It's inter-student violence, or is it, what are you saying?
Well, it leads. What you say leads to the next step. Because with social media, what happens a lot of time is that you can say things and get away with it. I don't have to look at you in your face. As we grew up, when we were kids, everything was face to face. If I didn't like you, I could tell you to your face. Now you can get on social media, sit at home, write a whole soliloquy about how you hate this person, press the button, and everybody has eyes to it. Now, whether it's true or not, it goes. So a lot of that leads to the next step, where that now, if these people do come face to face, that's what happens. Or friends get involved a lot of times. That's what I'm saying, how it spreads out, because to me, it's always cliques. It's not like just one girl and other girls. It's a whole bunch of people. A whole bunch of females will get involved because I like this person, I hate this person. And it's like the hater syndrome. If I hate you and someone else hates you and they're talking about you, I'm going to be friends with that person. Whether I like them or not, but just the fact that we have something in common, which is you, it makes it easier when I have to do what I need to do.
So I think we're getting off the subject. So let me bring us back, because I didn't realize we asked that question, and that's a good answer. Okay, that's a good answer. And I want to keep it into kind of, restorative justice, and you mentioned it a bit, is a big deal. I want to make sure that we open the floor as well. We've got 20 minutes left, more or less. And there are peer disciplinary groups. There are interventions where there are groups that come together and talk about, how do you feel? How does it feel to be you in school? How does it, how does it feel? What are your concerns? And then in those conversations, healing takes place. So do you have experience where, and I think you did say that there's a group coming from the outside in that's kind of facilitating those types of conversations. Real briefly, what's your experience with those types of, with that type of restorative justice, just real briefly, and then I'd like to really open it up to the floor.
Well, you have peer mediation, which is probably the biggest thing in schools right now, where kids can talk about anything. It's private, and they try to resolve the problem. Some places have youth court, where now you have the children, because children understand children better than adults do. We just look at things and just say, you know what, that's wrong, where other students can look at it, objectively, and sit back and say, you know what, I know why that person did that. I don't agree with it, but I understand what happened. So you have a lot of these things going on in the schools because it's very important. I know peer mediation was very great when I had issues, because I just bring in the leaders. They would talk to hey guys, you know what? This could either be internal or it could be external. And you try to keep things internal if you can when it comes to, issues in school, even with children, my students. They kept it internal, then it would be external, because what happens external is that's when we go back to what we're talking about, from the school to prison. Because now, guess what happens? If it's external, now you have outside entities getting involved, which most likely will be law enforcement. I had kids who had an argument about A and B. Before you know it, it jumped outside of the school. A lot of people got involved, parents got involved, and before you know it, the law enforcement got involved. And now those children are now suffering because of the fact that it got so out of control that other people had intervened. And if you have a system where in place, like you have a youth court in place, it's just instead of a regular family court, okay, that's what youth court is for. Youth court is a situation where you have high school students who are actually part of the judicial system. They run the whole show. And what it does a lot of times is that they will get a problem, which is a criminal, mostly a misdemeanor type situation. They will handle it and make a judgment before it goes actually maybe to family court or even to regular court. So they're the judge and the jury. They have a whole bunch of kids, from the judge all the way down to the jury, court officers, everything, bailiffs, they do all the stuff. And certain areas, I know in Greenberg we have it, it's effective in certain areas because you don't want to see these things, but sometimes it's out of our hands. Like, for example, I think Carol said with her son, if we caught kids with drugs or with a weapon, most likely they would be suspended for a whole year because you have up to 45 days to a year to suspend them. And it's based on a lot with the student. And the key part is when that happens, where the system breaks down is the educational aspect of it, because it's supposed to be homeschooling, okay, or out of school tutoring, where the kids are still supposed to get their mandatory, education outside the school. A lot of times that doesn't happen. The kid's suspended from school, school doesn't follow up, okay? And if it's long-term, it's mandated. If it's short-term, you know what, the kid comes back to school, guess what? That student's already behind anyway before he left, now he's even more behind.
No, and we're also talking about, very often, as you said, if we're talking about students who don't have resources to begin with, and maybe they're in a one-parent household, which is why they're acting out anyway, or they have, they're hungry or whatever their issues are, then sending them home, they again, like Carol said, they're kind of on their own. One of the things that Joe brought up is that we have to select the right individuals to serve in these roles, you know, because they're there very often to intervene, you know, if there is a shooter or if there is some kind of really dangerous situation. And it's necessary to have people who understand how to de-escalate, when to use force and when not to use force. If it's okay, Eugene and Damon, I'd like to ask folks to just unmute yourself, and if you have questions, is that good?
Yeah.
Right now?
That's what we're here for.
Tyrone?
Is that Tyrone? Tyrone Casey? Yeah. Go ahead, Tyrone.
Morning, Damon.
Good morning there, Ty.
Name is Cozy.
Cozy,
Tyrone.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's all good. Just think a nice warm fire. So, where do you get your inspiration from when you wake up in the morning? What drives you? What keeps your heart beating? What keeps your passion inflamed?
Well,
Tell me about that.
I would say I was very fortunate, to go to a school, have a loving family, older brothers and sisters. I'm the baby of 7, so that makes it easier. And I had role models ahead of me to make life easy for me. My parents were old school, strict. They wasn't tolerating no nonsense, no nothing. And education was very important because my parents never got the education when they were young. My mother was born and raised in Mississippi, so as that goes, I think the most she had was elementary school education. And my father, he had a disability, so he really never graduated from high school. But my passion is that the way I was brought up and the way people treated me, growing up in the area where you had a boys or girls club, a community center, people looked out for you. And that's why I got into, what I did, when it comes to dealing with children, because that helps a lot. As you look at children now, they'll talk about people who influenced them, who impacted them. And sometimes it's not even the parents, or a neighbor. Sometimes it's somebody from the school, somebody from the community. And with me, that was my passion to help. I'm a very benevolent person who likes to help other children understand that your goals can be accomplished. There's something special about every child, no matter how you look at them or what. They could be, some of my best students were my worst ones compared to other people, America's Most Wanted. But because of the fact that I reached out, I gave them, some ideas or ways of how to do. My objective was to get them out of high school. I said, if you get out of high school and you have a piece of paper, you can always dictate your life later on. It's not always about doing A, B, and C, but if you have that, that gives you a up on a lot of things, especially now, when it comes to employment and what you can do, because you accomplish something. And that was my main goal. I got up in the morning, okay, every day was a new day. I wanted children to understand that, what happened yesterday was yesterday. We can't do nothing about that. But whatever you do today, okay, make it the best that you can. And if you do that, you can see the positive of what could be if you decide to do it.
Very good. There's a lot of good commenting going on in the chat room. And so I just want to make sure that if you guys have any questions, now's the time. Now's the time. Yes, Betsy. Let's go with Betsy first. You want to take yourself off mute? There you go.
There you go.
So I'm white and I live in a white neighborhood, but I am a foster parent and I've had 5 or 6 teens of from Yonkers go through my white school, Hudson School. And one overall thing I noticed is that these schools are too much focused on the academic kids, the kids who are going to get 85s and above and go to, liberal arts colleges. And there aren't enough resources for the other kids. And By resources, I just mean more people like yourself, you know, more SROs, more social workers, etc. And, you know, it's so frustrating to me to see these schools bragging that they have an AP class for like bioengineering, but in the meantime, you know, they don't have the resources like enough resources, you know, like a U. And we really need to start grading our high schools on that, not on the number of AP classes or SAT scores. And so that's a comment, not a question. I guess the question is, how can we start a movement to do that? Is it totally local?
To answer your question, I'll be Betsy. We live in Westchester, okay?
Yeah.
When you talk about Westchester,
Right.
you're talking about upper
Right.
middle class, upper class.
Yeah.
For example, I went to Rannick High School, which is, I hate to say, 99.9% white.
Right.
Okay, there are more people of color in this chat box that went to my high school.
Yeah.
So, I mean, their emphasis when it comes to that,
Yeah.
where the people live,
Yeah.
you know, because of the fluency, it's going to be academics. They're not going to worry about, you know, the things that you're talking about, because what you're doing is, I hate not to make fun of it, but you know, it's like the Fresh Air Fun kids when I was growing up. You're taking kids from the urban area, you're bringing them and showing them a new way of life, where that if they assimilate to that life, it's great.
Yeah.
If they don't, okay, they'll take advantage of maybe some of those things that are supposed to be, you know, with those schools, like academics, then they're just regular people who just go through the motions, and they're the ones who become the victims.
Yeah.
Because the school's not going to reach out. I mean, I will tell you that now, okay? And like I said before, my issue I had when I was working, different between the Edgemont and the Greenberg school system, okay? Edgemont's very affluent. It's one step, you know, with Scarsdale. We don't have those problems. And I hate to say it, those schools probably got more problems internally with their students than some of the urban schools. I used to tell them all the time. They used to sit there and laugh at me. I sit there and say, you know, you have more of a drug problem here with your students than the kids. I know who the kids are in my school district that are doing drugs,
Right.
okay, who are out there doing the things. Your school district, because of privilege and because of parents, everybody's in denial.
Right.
Oh, my kid, no, yeah, you know, your kid's right now in your basement sitting up there having a pharmacy, you know, bigger than CVS. But that's something they don't want to discuss.
Right.
You know,
Damon,
and, yes,
I want to go into to the next question, and this I'm calling on Sue, because I know that you raised your hand, and then there was somebody else who raised their hand, and I'll find you as well.
She's right there. Go ahead, Sue.
Hi, everybody. Damon, a couple of times I heard you say something that just, it's like chalk on a blackboard to me, and I'm going to say it. I don't like the phrase good kids and bad kids. Now, when I hear people say that, I feel like it's there. I don't think that you're using it in a racist way, but that's how, when I hear it, I feel like it is being used. I have been told as a mother, oh yeah, your kid is one of the good kids, by teachers, and that's just something that I'm just going to share. But the other thing is that, don't you think that we can take some of our precious money from our budgets, I live in Yonkers, by the way, and use them for more guidance counselors, drug counselors, peer mediation counselors? That is what we talk about police defunding. We're not saying we don't want cops. We're saying the cops get every resource there is, and the schools are bled dry. So that's my opinion.
You can always, you know, it's this whole thing with police reform, you know, allocating funds, you know, from the police department to social issues, you know, like mental health, you know, community services and stuff like that. That's up to the school. I mean, it's, you know, the problem you have sometimes, I know with the school system, is that schools are supposed to be for academics, you know, but I also know too, school is supposed to be for everything. And when you have systems that are being pressured, especially the Yonkers school system, as you talk about, over the years, Yonkers had to actually expand and add more schools so they can keep their retention of students, because students were leaving the school district, going elsewhere, either private or parochial schools. So they added different types of schools. And not to gloat, but Yonkers High School is probably one of the best high schools in the state, because they revamped it, started it up again, and it has like one of the top science programs, you know, not to brag, but I say not even the state, in the country, because the student population they got there. So I know all of these things, but that's up to the schools, you know, the citizens who live there, okay?
Good.
You know, the board of education, a lot of things have to be done that way. But I agree. And I also mentioned too, I say good kids and bad kids. To me, you know what, also stated too that every kid has a specialty, you know,
This
when
is
it comes
true.
to being who they can be.
Right.
And we can sit here, we can play politics and games, but when you go out into the spectrum, that's what it is, good or bad, you know.
Thanks.
But it's not what you call a indictment on children. It's just the way we look at things in society. But we as individuals can make that decision, you know, when it comes to, as I say, good, because I said before, some of my best students were the ones who people consider bad. You know, those ones. Yes, go ahead, Gene.
Let's thank you so much, and thank you so much for clearing that up, the good and bad. I want to go to Christine, who has her hand up. Go ahead and take yourself off of mute. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think there's a real relationship. We expect every kid to be an academic kid, and there are kids who that academic isn't their specialty. And I think there's a real relationship between the school to prison pipeline and the fact that we don't provide any resources at the school for the kids who aren't academic in terms of ROP programs or other kinds of training. And I was just wondering whether you had any thoughts on that.
Oh, no, I agree 100%. When they took out the vocations in the schools, because when you had No Child Left Behind, you know, everybody's talking about the education gap. You know, that's what it was about, academics. You know, I want my kid to be a scientist, a doctor, a lawyer, the STEM program. Schools are pushing those schools, especially the urban schools. But they got away from vocation. You know, to me, when you had that going on, it gave kids other options. You know, when it comes to actually livelihood, you know, when I'm with my children, I gave them 3 options after they got out of high school: college, get a job, or military, because those are 3 things that, you know, are out there. And what I mean by job, yeah, I wouldn't care, you know, if my son worked in the supermarket. But there are kids in schools, and we have the BOCES program, okay, which is the Board of Cooperative Education Services, which are the only outlet, you know, that some schools have. I know Yonkers they still have Saunders High School, which is considered a vocational school. And some other bigger high schools, they have alternative programs. But BOCES right now is the only outlet for those students that you're talking about, who can be carpenters, plumbers, you know, barbers, anything outside of the academic norm. You know, I told even kids when I was with the dean, you know, I was also part of the academic team. I told kids, you know, unless you're going into a field like doctor's, lawyer, where you need a college per se education, look for something else to do. You know, be that carpenter, be that plumber. You know, go out there, electrician. Those are people who make the most money. If you look at it in the long run, steady money, because you always need them. You know, lawyer is very expensive. It probably costs you more to get a lawyer than it is to probably sit there and do anything else.
And let me just say too, now there's a shortage of electricians and plumbers, a shortage of the people that do that work. It is very interesting how the vocational education being taken out, and now there's a shortage. It is an interesting thing where I do see so much short-sightedness in the system.
Yeah.
Eugene, are there other questions?
Well, also just to add on also too with that is that a lot of schools now in New York State, they have what they call pathways now. Okay, when it comes to different choices that students can have, it's no longer, you know, you have to have a academic. You have to pass the Regents. That's one of the most requirements in the state of New York. You have to pass the Regents to graduate. They noticed that a lot of kids cannot pass Regents, are not there. So they have what they call pathways, but now that it's up to the school, the superintendent, who can sit back and overrule and state that since this kid did enough academic-wise, that they can graduate from high school with a high school diploma, instead of just sitting there being stagnant because they didn't do what the state requires. So there are ways right now in the school system if you check and see where they're doing things.
Thanks. Thanks, Damon. We have 3 minutes left, so that we stay in integrity with our time. Lane, is there anything that you want to say in closing?
I am not no, I'm not really. I just want to thank Mr. Yizar. Is there anyone else that has a question or a comment before we close? Because I don't want to cut somebody off. In that 3 minutes, we could definitely have someone commenting
2 minutes.
on what they
Just gonna say, I'll say real quick, Damon, God bless you for the work you're doing. I could tell it's coming from your heart. I hope that others feel that energy that you give to help love our children, because the kids know, no one cares how much you know till they know how much you care.
Yes.
You know, so I just want to bless you and thank you for being a part of this today.
Thank you there.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Cozy.
Thank you, everybody. Eugene, would you do us the honor of saying who we have coming up next week? It's Reverend Raymond, isn't it?
Yes, it is. The Reverend Dr. Raymond Anderson, I think Reverend Faith knows who he is. I think Brenda knows who he is. Dr. Reverend Raymond Anderson will be speaking to us next week about spirituality and activism. And he's very active in that. He is in the Baltimore, Maryland area. Well respected, it's, by me, of course, but in the field. So you really want to be here for that. Raymond, he speaks, he takes the gloves off, and he's really a for real down to earth person with the title Reverend Doctor. It's going to be a really powerful talk. So I invite you guys to be here next week, and invite your friends. All right, because the more, as Lane and I keep speaking about, the more people that get involved and have discussions like this, the better chances that we get to heal not just our community, but that has to spread into the city, the nation, the state, the world. All right. So thank you guys for always being here.
And happy Thanksgiving.
Before I go,
Damon, go ahead.
Before I go, I'd like to send all my love to all of you guys, especially to my elder, Dr. Mary Cobb. I see her there. And it's always great seeing her. I don't know where her husband is, but these people are inspirations, not because they're your mother, Lane, but because of what they have done and what they're still doing. I mean, they're an example of why maybe the way you and your sister are, but also too, they're a very good influence on me from the time that I've met them and known them. So my love to you, Dr. Cobb, and God be with you, my sweet. And all you guys, have a happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Happy
Be well.
Thanksgiving, everyone. Happy
All right,
Thanksgiving.
bye-bye.
Please enjoy your family. Eugene and I are here as resources. We are so pleased. Thank you. Damon Yizar, for the work that you do. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your passion.
Happy Gobble Day. Turkeys are sweating everywhere.
Everyone. All righty then. Eugene,
Bye
thank
now.
you, my brother. Thank you so much. All right. Bye, everyone.